right. Welcome, everyone. Come, sit. The tech assignment can wait 1 hour. You'll learn a lot tonight. It's really a great pleasure to welcome this evening Deborah Mesa and Anton Garcia Abril, who together form the architectural practice Ensemble, which I think it's safe to say today has recently been propelled into the stratosphere of adoration by students, as demonstrated by the many oh and ah this fall's poster received upon going up around the school. One way to describe this sense of producing instant fans, admirers, and followers is what I felt when I walked into the Grand Hall of the Chicago Architecture Biennial, which opened a few weeks ago and where the pièce de résistance of the show was displayed, a mini-city of 16-foot tall towers rereading the 1922 competition for the Chicago Tribune Tower, of which Ensemble's entry was one, rereading that competition. In the midst of the group, Ensemble's proposal stood out with incredible clarity, intelligence, and beauty. With a seemingly simple logic of construction and using relatively off-the-shelf looking metal studs, or at least they looked like they had been just found, Ensemble's tower created an undoubtedly present and aura-filled intervention out of the interlocking of horizontals and verticals, structure and void, density and rhythm, frames and fills. Neither directly referential nor rhetorical, the tower nevertheless seemed to answer with the most assurance the question it was invited to explore, hitting exactly the right tone and asserting with confidence architecture's ability to synthesize past and future while engaging the present most fully and clearly. Bringing together extreme sophistication, design research, and technological innovation with inspiring playfulness, a certain lightness, and great freedom to imagine new possibilities for architecture and for a poetics of life in architecture, Ensemble has developed a unique body of work which is breathing a big breath of fresh air into our field at this time. The story of the shipping of their already seminal Hemeroscopian house from Madrid to become their gorgeous Cyclopean house in Brookline is not only a story for our time, but also an inspiring tale that reaffirms our imagination's power to make the impossible possible, a power all too necessary today if we are to discover new ways of living, of building, and of enabling architecture to participate in the choreography and enjoyment of everyday life. Born out of contingencies, such as questions of affordability, constructability, and the desire to push systems and building technologies to move beyond the lab and serve an architecture for our time, but most certainly also born out of the desire to simply build fantastic space, the two houses and the metamorphosis of one into the other offers a spirit that carries across all of Ensemble's work. Whether they are engaging with fabrication and prefabrication, or whether they are engaging with stones carved out of the site they are intervening in, Ensemble's work builds both presence within, but also resonance across the context it exists in. At times framing the landscape, whether urban or natural, and at times becoming a part of that landscape, their structures and buildings constantly transform structure into architecture, collapsing the two to produce a raw sophistication which in their own terms brings together, quote, explosive imagination and reality, at once infrastructure, architecture, and nature, and always resulting in exciting new hybrid conditions and typological inventions. Ensemble Studio was founded in 2000 with a strong commitment to teaching and research, making and building. Anton is a professor at MIT since 2012. Deborah is currently a visiting professor at Cooper Union, as well as a research scientist at MIT. Together with their studio, they've been recognized extensively through being invited to biennales, including Venice, Chicago, the Shenzhen Hong Kong Biennale. Amongst their recent international prizes, the 2017 Architizer A+ Award, the NCC Excellence in Structural Engineering Award of 2016, and the Chernikov Prize in 2012. Please join me in welcoming Anton and Deborah of Ensemble.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mare. Very generous words and We are very welcome here, and I've been several times invited by my admired and good friend Stephen Hall in his Architectonical of Music. So I feel almost at home, even though we've never lectured here. So it's a pleasure to join a lot of friends that we have here.
Now that we know that we've taken students out of their desks, we have to make it worth it. So we are under pressure here. Now it's a real pleasure, and Amale did an amazing introduction. Thank you very much. We almost want to use it maybe for a book, or you describe us even better than we see ourselves. But yes, we are a group of architects. We see us with engineering background and artistic vocation. Our work ranges across scales, technologies, programs, materialities, geographies. We like the complexity and the diversity that being an architect can involve. And we like engaging in new projects that we have never tackled before. We started as local architects in Spain, working in some of its historic cities. So we learned how to work with history, how to interpret it, how to reimagine it, or be inspired creatively by history. And we became builders also very early on in our practice, almost by necessity. Because we realized that if we wanted to build some of the ideas, non-conventional ideas that we had to develop the expertise and the tools, and we had to be able to take responsibility for changing some of the rules of the game sometimes. So our first works happen in this city that we are showing here, Santiago de Compostela, which is built with stone, with granite from Galicia, over different moments in time. And for both projects, one of the requirements was to build with stone. So we wanted to insert ourselves in this conversation, but in the contemporary time, in the time that we are now. And we didn't have any expertise working with this material. So we decided, of course, we had the references that we had studied, that we had visited, that we loved and admired. And we also found amazing uses of the material in some of the landscapes of Galicia. But we were not satisfied with the products that industry or the market was giving us to use for our building. So we decided to go to the sites of production, to the quarries in Galicia. This is Salceda de Caselas, one of the quarries very close by. And we decided to go there to learn about the material, to learn from the workers in the quarry, to learn about the technologies that they were using to cut the material, to explode it out of the mountain, to also understand the scale of this material since it's extracted until it's transformed. And we were completely inspired by this experience, and actually probably very lucky to be ignorant about it, because we were very fresh, no? And we actually went to the quarry. We saw all these spare stones that the quarry owner was complaining about because they were irregular and he could not cut it into completely precise pieces, and they were scattered all over. And we asked him, like, can we use this for free? Can we take them and make something out of them? And he said yes, for sure, because he was just going to smash them and use this for gravel. So we went back to the office and we started working and thinking, how could we reuse the material? I think today that we carry 3D scanners in our phones, all these tasks would have been much easier. But at the time, we had to, in a way, work with a lot of uncertainty, and the model became our big ally. No? But then we had to devise a plan to convince the owner of the quarry to let us some of the space to do some tests on the ground and make sure that what we were imagining was really possible and made sense. So these are some of the tests that we were doing. First, we were just going to build part of the wall that we had designed.
I think this introduction shows what are our beginnings, no? As designers. As you can see, this is not conventional design, but this was what we started to use as our primary methods of understanding architecture. Go deep into the roots of it, work with the systems, the processes, the tools, and be able to prototype it, almost fabricate it. And this includes doing it with landscape. This was the full-scale model, or one-to-one model, or the built structure that we did for the Santiago Compostela. We had to rebuild it again. But this reaction, unearthing the substrate of architecture from its place is something that has accompanied since the beginning, understanding architecture as the conjunction of all these infrastructural, poetical, and technological links.
And we realized that from these first works that the time that went into the idea of how to build this building and how to make this wall happen was a small fraction compared to all the time that involved really getting to develop the expertise and learn about the material and convince the different agents in the process to make it happen and to make the tests on the quarry to convince that this was a possibility.
And here we learned the main essence of architecture, the weight, the masses, how to deal with gravity, all the tectonical encounters, how light reacts, so all the forces and energies that are embedded into the architecture. We also learned how these things could react with people in different conditions, and how this became a part of the insertion of architecture into a culture or a city.
Yeah, so this transposition of the scale of the landscape into the heart of the city was actually creating an unexpected architecture that brings or requires a level of interpretation, of engagement with the work.
So after living that way, this is how our kid sees ourselves. No, it's dad carrying the crane and mom driving the concrete truck. Okay, so we've been embedding all these architecture practices in the design of the houses, in our lives. So there has been no distinction between what we were doing and the way we lived all this journey.
Yeah, and actually after these first works, where we started building by necessity, but then we became builders by heart, we realized that the house has become our field of experimentation. It's a scale that has allowed us to investigate certain ideas about architecture that then we can take to other levels. So the way that we are going to structure this lecture is actually departing from 3 different houses that we have built, how these ideas have been taken to other buildings or scales. And we'll start with the Merscopian house.
So even in very industrialized process, there's there's a waste, there's a raw material, there's some primary elements that could be reinterpreted or reused. And our approach to the pre-stressed concrete technology was the fascination of all these internal guts that contained all the tensions that were going to be expressed and put in performance in a structure. But ultimately, they had the shape given by the efficiency, by a very synthetic, almost soulless form that we thought that could be perfectly put in an equilibrium system, and therefore create a narrative based in how it was built, how it was fabricated. So all the strength of this house was understanding that the spaces that were the consequence of the logic of how it was made, how it was engineered, how it was assembled, how it was transported. All these helix of transmission, of connections, of connectivity in that spiral that ended in that stone as the expression and culmination of that gravitatorial itinerary, and also the expression of the architectonical nature, the gravitatorial nature of the house. All this was scripted to be almost automated through a clear logic of heavy lifting prefabrication. And this video expresses how our thoughts in the studio matched the way things were built. How some of the very abstract intellectual games that we induce when we are designing have to somehow match with the constructability of the project, and therefore it has an inherent beauty of how it's built and how it's constructed. Actually, we were the builders of this house. We were the contractors. I know this is unprecedented in the United States, but we built as builders, as general contractors, all our early works, and that gave us the knowledge and the sensibility of understanding that the mysteries of architecture are related to its tectonics, to its fabrication, to its assembly processes. And I think this is something that architecture is starting to lose, because our profession is being cut into disciplinary, let's say, parcels that do not touch each other. And it's a pity, because we understand an holistic performance of the architect over all the stages of the process. And I think even being able to intercede as master builders in an old-fashioned way gives the architecture a completely different touch and interpretation that we are happy to maintain.
So I think this video also reflects very well with this parallel situation between the model and the construction, how we understand and we use the model as a way of thinking, as a way of designing, versus a way of representing and maybe selling the work to others. For us, it's very instrumental, because while we are designing, we are many times thinking using technologies already embedded in the design that we need to figure out how they are going to come together. So that part of the construction comes very early on in the process.
And by doing this nude expression of the structure, or revealing how a building has been made, we developed an architectonical language, or at least interest, based in these almost similarities between all these previous moments of the structure being built, of the gravitas of the house something happened. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so the house, when it's completed, when the structure is completed, it reveals already the order of the space, the scale of the space, the nature of all the living areas that are going to happen. And then it's a question of adding the rest of the elements to make it thermally enclosed and to provide the functionality of the house.
So what we learned about this house was that we could achieve spatial goals of lightness, transparency, continuity, how to relate with the horizon and the surrounding, even with a very synthesized, almost artificial system of beams, of things that are unrelated to the let's say the environment, no? These pieces are all designed according to their mechanical efficiency. But this reinterpretation was what gave us some clues that the spatiality associated to how to put this in a particular balance, no? How to excite the gravitatorial actions by tracing all those limits in an open way. No? As you can see, all these reactions from the vibrant line of the landscape clash, no? Versus the linearity of those architectonical traces. No? So we learned from this house, and we wanted to apply all this logic to other buildings, greater scale buildings, and some buildings that historically or traditionally do not admit, let's say, prefabricated inserted systems into it, like a transformation of the Matadero. Matadero was a communal work in the slaughterhouses in Madrid that other architects, some of them in this school, like Iñaki Carnicero or Andrés Jaque, worked, and we all were commissioned different spaces of this Matadero to transform it into cultural and educational facilities.
So some of the things that we had learned with the Meroskopian house, like how to use prefabrication without creating unimaginative buildings, or how to use prefabrication in more creative ways, how to take the best of what prefabrication offers, which is really taking off-site a big part of the work and reducing the risks in the construction, reducing or being able to improve time and quality. We tried to take them to this context, which was, it's actually a very sensible context, which is protected buildings, very beautiful engineered buildings from the beginning of the 20th century, and how to insert a new structure that would dance with the old structure and would create another space, but that would allow both times to be legible at the same time. That was the idea that took us to propose the insertion of these bridges of activities that answered some of the questions of the competition, of how to create a second level in the warehouses, but enabled the old and the new to live together and distinguish themselves.
So all the challenge in this building was to insert those beams through the eyes of the building. So again, a technological challenge that became the performance and became also the soul of the new space, by almost invading slightly. And this is also a code issue. We could convince the authorities that this was not part of the building, and therefore we inserted it naturally through the windows, and then we got a second level. So this is the kind of fascination that technology offers an architect, the way of threading through technology, some of the main aspects of a building, like do not insert 25-meter beams through a window. No? In this case, this was the way the building existed ultimately.
And actually what seems very smooth and easy was the part that obviously took most time to figure out and to design and engineer and orchestrate, no? Especially because everybody was thinking about precast concrete and big beams introduced through the windows, and they were anticipating some kind of catastrophe. No? But you can see how the insertion of these elements into the space, like we see them in the Menoscopium house, because of their span, because of the way that they are supported on the windows without really revealing revealing very clearly how they are supported. They are very heavy, but they seem quite light in the space.
So all this effort, no? all these challenges to the logic of the building, the logic of construction, ultimately is for a goal, and the goal is very architectonic. It's the cohabitation and the friction about these two structures, this kind of dissonance, the fragility of that thin column with the presence of this lintel, no? Or the horizontal order of the basilical organization of that warehouse with the transversal connection that this bridges. No? I think these encounters, these dissonances, these intromissions of structure into another structure was the argument of this building and the beauty ultimately of the space. And this continues on and on. And we have been still working in the pursuing the idea of these systems of construction to build greater scales, from a house to a transformation of a historical building to a high-rise. And we do think that this has an enormous potential that we are designing, first intellectually and conceptually, and ultimately we're searching for the built opportunity for the culmination of this itinerary. This building, that is what we presented in Chicago, it's called the Big Bang. It's the challenge of the American tower. The tower as a core and shell system. What we presented here is the explosion, that's what we call the Big Bang, the explosion of the gravitas of the core as the place where all the masses is concentrated to liberate the envelope. This is the classical modern tower. We understood that in a contemporary way, and attending the logic of fabrication also offsite, this could be eccentric to the geometry of the center and could therefore adopt several forms in this kind of expansion of all the pieces. So this is the standard core in any tower, and these are like different variances of the same mass dispersed in a more efficient way through creating a new spatial condition. This is what we wanted to explore in the Chicago Tribune tower as the culmination of a research project that has come in Ensemble Studio, back and forth in different projects that are yet unbuilt.
So by exploring this core, we are eliminating the rest of the structures and the transportation systems. All the infrastructure becomes the structure of the buildings. The accessibility or the possibilities of access into the different levels is multiplied, and then the different levels that we are creating become or are able to have an urban scale that allow for different uses and different programs and different architectures also to happen inside. No? So the tower suddenly takes a more urban scale, and versus being a massive object that is completely introverted and indifferent, suddenly the city can start invading programmatically the tower in
And as you can see, all these pieces that congregate the vertical movement of not only mechanics and forces, but also people, MEPs, etc., are distributed within the perimeter in a static ring that is permeable but structural. And this is what gave all these different platforms a completely different spatial condition, a certain urbanity, an extension from the ground level, and the possibility of being freed from the core and the perimeteral shell. This is what we envisioned for the new American tower that the competition in Chicago celebrated in the early 20s, and now the Biennale re-celebrates as a challenge for different architects to think about the tower as a typology. And
sometimes when we show these projects, we will get the question like, why are you so in love with concrete, no? So now you will see that, yes, we are in love with concrete, but not only concrete, no? So while we are doing this research, we are also interested in the very opposite. Because while we were working with very heavy elements, we also discover the good things about it and also the limitations, no? So we had the chance to approach very lightweight materials when thinking about emergency housing for Japan some years ago when the tsunami happened, and we were reusing some of the industry of EPS foam that was directed to build fish boxes to preserve fish. So we were reusing them into a system that would allow people to build their own home within, using just 4 people in a week, they were able to build their home without using any other auxiliary method. So from here, the research evolved, and this is now in MIT. We were doing a workshop with the students building a very essential unit called the Kubek Igloo, which is this very massive foam structure that where foam performs as enclosure, as a structure, as everything, and there's no other additional material giving reinforcement. Of course, this is all working in compression, so this was almost building like a super big model that is actually the building, no? So we were very much in love with this material for some time because it's so easy and so light, and we were able to build a building even without a scaffolding that we discovered in the US. You need a license to have a scaffolding. So, and then we could move it. So now we are actually thinking where we are going to move it, and it might become a very nice hut in the mountains or who knows what, no? But we discovered, the opportunities of lightness. Of course, foams has many other not so good aspects like fire or working with tension. So then we started hybridizing the material with other materials that would give it structural reinforcement, resistance to fire, and also learning from the reinforced concrete that we have used. We were applying some of the logics to develop these very ultralight systems. Here now, not anymore a structure in compression, but adding some tension and building a beam.
So what this research in the lab represented was our interest of detaching two things that architecture has always put together is mass and weight. We understood that we could build enormous, strong in weight structure without having all the burden of the mass. And therefore, we could apply this to different parts, like a 50-foot beam that we put in tension, a wall, a slab, a roof. And this was what inspired us to enrich this research in a real building in a real place in Brookline, Massachusetts. By the way, it's our house and office in the United States. So, first of all, we had to develop all this technology to solve a problem. And the problem was that the only thing that we could afford when you arrive to the United States with no credit history is this, okay? And this is what we built, what we bought to get our office, and we needed to do something to extend this vertically. Well, so it had to be very, very light.
Yeah, I mean, for everybody in the neighborhood, this was the ugly duckling, but of course we're all architects here, so you're all seeing the potential, no? This is like a candy for architects, actually. And we didn't know at the time that we would be allowed to build and expand, but we had the intuition that we might.
So immediately what we did was to spin off all the research that we had done in the lab that we shared with you. It was still raw, it was not ready to code, it was not ready to market, no? So we had to push it a little bit further and understand that that was going to be part of a pre-manufactured piece that, by the way, we decided for several reasons that we were going to build it in Madrid, Spain. The principal reason was that we could do it for 1/10 of the price and much better, okay? And and also we didn't have to deal with a Massachusetts contractor, okay? But that's another story. The fact is that we wanted to demonstrate the potential of off-site maritime prefabrication construction. As you know, all the off-site generally is a local tradition that goes from A to B by truck. When you have to put this into a boat, it's a completely different set of rules. You have dimensional and weight limitations, but it opened a new way of understanding off-site construction. So we decided to go through it. We designed the plan. It's basically a loft, a room that has 4 walls. And
actually, we were fortunate that the dimension of the house is a 30 by 40, yeah, and the length of the maritime container is 40. So it kind of...
So we dimensioned all these pieces according to these limitations and requirements of the transportation, like any off-site construction limit. And there was an added limit, is that we didn't want to reinforce any of the existing foundations, that we outdid it a little bit, and they were not bad, much better than any timber framed building of any neighbor, because this was a commercial industrial building. But still, we didn't want to add a lot of weight into those linear walls.
Also, because we had been living in the lower structure for almost 2 years, we had redone all the house to fit the family needs. So the only thing that we were missing was a big space, a big family room, almost like a multi-purpose domestic space where we could have friends come and where we could have an office meeting, or where we could watch a movie. And that's actually what we designed, one big room on top.
So what you've seen here is the expansion of what we have done in all our career previously, is the design of all these carefully customized pieces. Don't associate any prefabrication to a standard thing. This is the old school association. I think the biggest way of customization is through an industrial process. So each of these pieces were individual and customized. One contained the bathroom, the other one the kitchen, the other one the closets, and every single of those pieces had an individuality. The computer is failing all the time, and it's strange because it's a Mac, you know, and Mac does not fail. So anyway, the logic was to do all these assemblies with the added difficulty that all these pieces were coming in a logistic of maritime transportation with all these containers in a given neighborhood. Okay, this is the problem, and architecture had to solve it. So we did a workshop with students like you that started first in MIT and after in Madrid in our shop. So all this was done by non-skilled architects. Architects that were students and recent graduates that were interested in making, in building as the way of approach design. As you see, everything started, as I said before, in this research, exploring the lightness, exploring the potential of this technology. And after, in an Ensamble Fabrica, our shop, we started manufacturing it.
And here we are evolving the technology. We are adapting it to code. We are reinforcing it more than it structurally needs for safety and for fire. So it's already something different to what we had been doing in the lab, but we are doing these prefabricated elements that in the Metascopium house they had to be built in a factory and tracked and assembled by huge cranes. Here we are doing it with our hands, with really low-tech techniques, very easy tools, and then we are craning it with a much smaller crane afterwards.
What we did here was fusioning two tradition, two constructive traditions. The North American is based in framing. You guys frame buildings, okay? In Europe, we don't frame buildings. We do something else, walls and columns and beams. But here, the framing is also associated to thinness and light. We wanted this framing with a thick corporality, with a certain body, and with weight without the mass. This would be the principle. And the rest of the encounter techniques was, again, the scale maybe of the pre-stressed concrete beam size, but with the assembly lines, using the 4x8s, the studs. I mean, it's an hybrid craft that it worked pretty good, I have to say, in matching and in giving the spatial conditions that we were willing to.
So what did prefabrication mean here for us? It was being able to do it ourselves, but it's formable then, because all of these materials are, although they are prefabricated, they come to the site, and if there's any problem, they can be modified. And then it was, really thinking, we are resolving our own house, but how can we take these to collective housing, and how can we apply these that we are experimenting and testing on our own skin and bodies? How can we take it and use all the knowledge that we have acquired during this experiment? Now try to convince the different agents that need to make this happen at a different scale. And we have realized that having built an example changes completely the way that you can approach somebody with a new idea.
So we had the chance that a developer, now a friend and by the way, a Cooper Union architect, approached us and asked us if we were interested in real estate. And we said yes, even though we've never built an apartment. But we think that all this logic could be turned into high-rises, into different, let's say, real estate needs. So we have been since working in trying to extend to this high-rise, all this logic of prefabrication, of hybrid structures, of lightness in origin and concrete injection in destiny, ultimately to provide a new spatial condition to the high-rise multi-purpose tower. Conceptually, we're not designing the apartment. We're just giving the frame, the structure, the views, and the performance. And any user that buys these frames that have been dimensioned according to certain code and market requirements will fill them with any layout that they are comfortable with, like any of these lives, aesthetics, dimensions, and multiple architects that could do all of these different layers of the structure.
So in the Menoscopian house, for example, it's quite radical in some of the constructive aspects. The layout of the house is more conventional. There are rooms assigned to specific functions that only happen once a time, except for the courtyard that gathers them all. No? In the Cyclopean house that we showed in Brookline, there's this just one big thing that serves all purposes, and we use it all day round. We use it to work, we use it to sleep, we use it to play, we use it for everything. No? So these, we realize that also now with new generations, there is not this traditional family with 3 kids that have this need of a very conventional layout. And also, with our own experience, we try to apply this flexibility in the house, providing the infrastructure associated with the structure, and then really being able to allow the home to grow over time.
So this zip tower has no height, has no form, has just the vibration of these double and single structural frames that follows the rules of the market. So this is a developer dream. That ultimately you stack during the growth of the project according to the needs of the market. So this is something that we've also made several variances over the same idea with different ways of stacking these frames, always with the same idea that the perimeter has to be freed for the vistas, for the air, for the light, and also all the structure has to concentrate in a cross, so all these quadrants are free to develop with new layouts. This has become, it started as a research project, now we are spinning it off into more than research, even though it's not yet built, but we are already testing some of the prototypes. So our practice, and this is maybe the message, started being very focused in the way things were made, trying to develop the tools, the attitude versus architecture and the engineering required to extend all this from a conceptual idea into something that has to be immediately put into a building.
And again, in these projects, let's say the architectural elements are divided into the scale of the domestic that allows for this prefabrication of site using, again, lightweight systems that makes transportation and assembly easier to then be hybridized with concrete and stabilized on the site. So in these prototypes, we are merging now the different technologies of the lightweight construction and the concrete on the site.
So now we're going to end with a completely different story that might be antagonic, contradictory of what we said so far, but it's part of us. And we've done it always in a parallel, and we're working how to make convergences between what is coming from a raw, natural environment to something that is fully industrialized, automated, designed to be mass-produced and systemic, okay? These apparently contradictory approaches to architecture is trying to make an extreme revision of all the spectrum of our action. As we've said before, everything started with a small house, with a manifesto, with a very paradigmatic posture or attitude versus a way of handling an architectonical exercise in this landscape, in a cliff of La Costa da Morte, the death coast in Galicia. It's, by the way, the closest part to to America in the continental Europe. If you go west, it's exactly where you will encounter them. And we wanted to build with nature. Our cabanon of beton used the scale of the cabanon just to make a thick crust of nature surrounding the dimension and the scale of a little hut. We called it the Truffle because it's a parasite of nature. It starts with a hole in the ground that receives a ready-made, almost system of hay bales stacked accordingly, and everything is refilled in between those interstices between these two natural conditions and unearthed. Not yet being architecture, this is ready to be transformed into architecture by actions of a cow carving and inhabiting it, and growing, or actions of transforming it into something habitable and comfortable. I want to show you this video that again tells the story that is behind this project. As other projects, starts with a workshop. A couple of young architects and students and ourselves making.
And while all the other projects, or most of the other projects, were about precision, about making those beams fit into the windows, without error, this is very much about uncertainty sometimes, and about flexible boundaries. So the idea is, or the architecture has to do with reusing and using some of the resources that are around, about creating a certain space, but not really about the final detail or dimension of things.
What we learned by doing this was that all these materials put together the wrong way, giving all the actions to the contamination, the encounter, the referrals of all these matters that were just by the side, we discovered something that could be close to an architectonical language, where those boundaries were blurred between what is architecture, what is nature. And also, we learned from the concrete being capable to express a lot of different matter conditions, from a viscous print of those hay bales to the liquid, almost continuum of the lintel that resembles the petrified sea that is facing, to the exterior earth that is almost printed into the thickness of the wall. We also learned of the aesthetical proposition that this ugly little cabanon was inviting us to think about, how we could refer beauty not to a standard canon of the way things are harmonical, symmetrical, and beautiful, but hiding these I would say substances that architecture still provides.
So the design documents for this project were was mainly a recipe of a list of actions that we had to do, an idea of the dimensions that we needed to achieve, but there was a lot of improvisation during the process, and we could build it again and we wouldn't get the same result, no? But that's one of the points of doing it.
The computer has collapsed. So, there it is.
It's coming back.
Okay. Okay, sorry about this. So, yeah, this little hut, the Truffle, was the original moment of a later project that still ongoing, that we named it Structures of Landscape. It's done in Fishtail in Montana, in the I would say the soul of the western of North America, where it's a place that is full of history, even though it's completely inhabited, wild nature, and undeveloped, completely undeveloped. We were called to do an art center, and our position was not to do an art center like a building, but to exploit all those pieces that compose an art center scattered within the landscape, each of them having their own position and creating kind of a constellation among these others, among them.
So Kathy and Peter, when they approached us to talk about this landscape and about their vision of an art center, this ranch is about 11,000 acres of land, so it's really a vast extension. And their main ambition was to be able to build an art center that would be in total harmony with nature, where music takes a big part. So the architecture had to be able to live in this landscape without creating an obstacle in it, and had to allow the music activity to take place and to, in a way, bring the users and the visitors in contact with nature through the music.
So we as architects, we started with our extensive research, trying to go back to the origins of almost everything that we knew of, the origins of the place, its geological condition, the origins of architecture, and try to get rid of everything that we had learned. And sometimes to go to the origins, you have to renounce, you have to get rid of history, architecture itself, geometries, systems, everything that we knew that it was part of the discipline. We tried to erase it from the equation and react architectonically through these models to the place. We did a lot of them. We shared all this research with Peter and Kathy, and we did this master plan where all the different pieces were related as this constellation that printed the relations on the map of the ranch, and disseminated all the different programmatic spaces among it.
So each of these architectures have their own intimate connection with the landscape. They are very much spread, and they each are able to exist without any activity, so they don't look like empty buildings, and this was something very important because it's a very remote place, but they are able to serve as shelters for the visitors, as landmarks in the place.
The first one, the academia, it's an explosion. We wanted to celebrate the transformation of energy into space. We know that this has been explored through physics, through art, through poetry, but we wanted to celebrate this as our first action to connect with the soul of the place. By the way, under that geological is one of the biggest bubble of lava and one of the most active volcanic areas of North America. So we wanted to depart from this. So we did some experiments still in models, where we built a chunk of mass, and we inserted in the center of masses an energy. In this case was a little firecracker. And we wanted to see that that energy was transformed into space and make this event, this performance, this very, very pure architectonical primary moment, the project.
These are techniques that are not usual building buildings, but they are usual demolishing buildings, and they are very much used in the quarry, where we're showing the first images, to very precisely cut big masses of rock out of the mountain.
We learned how to do this when we were in the quarry in Santiago, extracting the masses to work with. The client loved the idea, but he doesn't know how to make the insurance work. And so we did others. Some of them are unbuilt, others are in the track, to be built, and others are built. This was a fontana. Fontana, there's natural reservoirs where all the water condenses, and where the animals go to drink. So we wanted to pump all that into a vase, where not only animals but the visitors could take a drink and a refreshment. So we wanted a fontana that could leak, that could be exuberant and baroque, like the fountains that we've all admired in Rome, but that had the particularity that by losing its balance, transformed a vase into an unstable cascade that threw all the water back to the reservoir and pumped again. So we wanted to play with the hydraulics and the gravity of water through this unstable vase that was born conceptually as the reaction of the weight through the hydrostatic pressure that was displacing the concrete. And that will be the way we would have built, or we will build, the fontana in the future.
So each of these pieces, that it's different in its process of construction and in its form and in its conception. They are actually amplifying some of the elements of the landscape. So wherever there is a reservoir of water, these architectures help to make it available for the visitors. Some of the shelters are providing shade where there is absolutely none. There's a bridge that you will see after that it's connecting disconnected parts of the landscape. So they are, in a way, adding with very little actions some valuable spaces in the ranch.
Another structure was a reticula. The reticula as a grid when it becomes part of something that has no Cartesian order. No? So this was something that we explored, and it came part of a bigger scale that is being developed. And other structure would be a ponte. El ponte was a piece of infrastructure that had to jump through a canyon. So we understood that standard technology of constructing bridges are the ones that use the earth as mold, could be interpreted with this approach to architecture and infrastructure that we were using. So we again did the model according to this technology that would have been used in the real fabrication of it, as using a steep oblique plane to cast it against the earth, and of course reinforced it accordingly.
So these videos that we are showing are actually the very early moment of conception, but already we are testing ways in which they could be built. You know, sometimes when we really arrive to defining these elements, the process changes. No? But we are already trying to think how they are built with the land.
Conceptually, we wanted this to be like a dead trunk of a tree, petrified into the landscape and part of it. Like this rostra. Rostra is just kind of a tongue looking to the landscape as a cantilevered mirador that was thrown through a beautiful canyon called the Midnight Canyon. So anyway, all these pieces do have the particularity of using a connection within the conceptual, the projectual, and the constructive modes. We wanted to be as pure as we could in transvasing part of the, I would say, artistic approach to the craft of the model to the construction. And each of these singular structures all do have the common ground of being, let's say, petrified, magmatic, non-geometrical abstractions of a clear structure. Before we show you the built ones, I want to show you the ones that we're working right now. It's La Tabula Acustica. This is a bigger venue. We want this to be like a Greek temple, no? A silent, almost archaeological part of the landscape that inhabits in it with its own presence, but it's not yet a building. It's not a temple. It's kind of an ancestral presence that still could be used from time to time. This was the kind of program that we wanted. We didn't want an auditorium with enclosure and air conditioning. We wanted a place where acoustically the sound will be profoundly reacting to the place, and also be able to be part of that landscape when we're not using it. So, while the projects that we have built, and we will explain later, are related to the things that we have in the landscape, the portals, the hills. In this case, what we wanted was to bring the mountains that are facing the horizon in the place spatially, conceptually, and I would say almost emotionally into the place as a music venue. So what we did was to clear up the bedrock in the ground, just facing those shales of bedrock in a I would say a natural first scratch of the earth, and locate a lintel that had the property of rebounding acoustically the music into the space cover.
So the way that we are thinking will be built will be crushing the rock that exists on the place that will serve to create the acoustic shell, and then use the structures to lift the casted slab with hydraulic pistons.
So all this action of lifting all that mountain, that petrified mountain, as an acoustical ceiling, I think was the effort that we wanted to represent, no? as bringing that spatial condition and using it as the way of creating this image and this space condition. The mountain inverted and referred to the ceiling, and the materiality of the mountain present into the construction of that structure. So again, the model, the mock-up, the first workshop. No? This is a model that requires foundation, right? Because it weighs like 300 pounds. the craft of that mountain in the ground, no? as the first tabula that we are going to cast.
And here with this model we are jumping scale, so we are in a way developing the choreography of how this would be built, and we are already embedding a lot of engineering on thought and certain level of precision of the different actions that would then be happening on the site. This is actually our way of training, of getting fit when we are developing a process that we are not familiar with.
Now that we're engineering this, the challenge is another, is where would we locate the hydraulic pistons, how we balance the wind loads with that action of levitation that we are so interested in.
So when we showed this master plan, this map of possibilities for the ranch, the clients selected 3 pieces, which are the ones that we have built and that you can see if you visit Tippett Rise. And they selected 2 portals that are 2 symbolic accesses into the landscape, each located in one of the 2 ways of access and circulation of the ranch. And the other one is Domo. It's a place for performances to music performances to happen. It's also a smaller acoustic shell.
What we wanted to do with these doors was just to create the access to the unlimited, vast, and complete complete immensity of the place. So we wanted to recreate, with this action of lifting these 2 masses of 100 tons, the entry to that place that had to connect architectonically and programmatically the landscape with the center. So all the effort was to bring all the first craft of molding the stones into very precise engineering. This precision was absolutely required for the rigging and the lifting of these structures, and to complete the constructive process. This process that we are trying to express here started with a very, very intense mapping of the place to choose in an unreferenced and with the lack of scale position of these entries.
And then here that we are translating these processes that we were designing with the models, we are now on the site working with the real people, the real men, typically here, that are going to do all the reinforcement, that are going to control the excavator, and we have to have the flexibility to adapt and to change sometimes and to improvise. So there's, when working in these kind of conditions where there are some parameters that you cannot control until you are there, you have to embed that flexibility, that possibility of options into the design.
About how we build this is what we would call a very bad job in concrete, okay? Is basically breaking all the rules of how to do a concrete structure. Is not mixing correctly the concrete, getting concrete from different plants, throwing the pigments after, having a non-rigid mold, contaminating the concrete by mixing it with earth, stones. I mean, it was the full decalogue of what not to do. We actually did it. And after, how to lift this was also a beautiful, heroic challenge. All these cranes had to rig and perfectly balanced the moment of gravity, the moment of touch of these stones. This was the celebration of the presence of gravity and one of the main important aspects of this architecture.
But of course, having built them in this position would have been much more difficult and would have required a lot of other auxiliary tools and structures.
And like in the Truffle, as an extension, we used the concrete as a conglomerate of all the different substances and matters of the surrounding, giving the extreme differences. For example, as you can see, the internal part versus the external that is casted within the plastic, and almost a crystallized version of the concrete versus the very rough interior. I think this dichotomy, this completely different condition of matter is what reacts in the equilibrium of these two stones. The inverted portal is the other side of the entry, so we use the same ideas, but putting the smooth part of the structure in the interior and the rough in the exterior. And therefore, we discovered how completely different was in terms of his presence into the landscape.
The first one refers to the canyon and it's rough in its interior, and the second one refers to the mountains and allows nature to expand in the exterior rough space where the seeds get trapped and where the snow also gets trapped.
And after these two entries, we have the first room, the Domo. It's a room for chamber music, for solos, for duettos. We wanted this Domo to be kind of the primitive first structure, the dome, the domus, the cavern. So we did provide this acoustical condition to the wrinkles of that of the dome, and a mechanical position of these three big legs that celebrated the hills and emulated the hills as a space of gathering. As you can see, the plans are almost like topographies that we casted on a compacted gravel bed, and we unearthed it as a discovery, almost as an archaeology that gave us almost a treasure that we didn't know, by the way, how was the result. And the models, again, we honor the models, and we make the models always a big event, sometimes family event, as you can see here. And these models do guide our practice, have always guided the practice since the beginning, and also test part of the performance and the spaces that we are creating.
And so here we were trying to figure out all the construction process, but also we were trying to come up with the textures that would provide the best reflectivity for sound to move, and the mixture between the concrete and the ground that you will see again performed on the land.
So in this project, what we did was, first of all, create the topography. We didn't want to harm the existing layer of grass, so we did borrow actually part of the gravels that construct the compacted roads of the ranch, and we gave it back later on. So all this bed of almost 20 feet of gravel, this prefabbed mountain, was the mold that we were going to use to cast. So the cast took 24 hours, and all the previous work took 6 months. So this is the time frame between carving, molding, reinforcing, and casting. It was a fantastic experience, no? To operate and to draw with the excavator, no? all that spaces, no? To wrinkle it, to create all the surfaces that we were anticipating we wanted to be the last print.
One of the most difficult parts of this project was to figure out what was the right scale for the landscape, because it's something that it was almost impossible to measure, and that we actually could not.
As you can see, this is not a standard construction. This is something that we did among us with people from Ensemble Studio, people locals, a contractor, the branch manager. This was kind of a bigger scale performance, but of course none of us knew what we were doing. And I think this was part of the excitement. And this moment was magical. No? We were removing all that soil, and discovering, like an archaeological ruin, what had happened. No? And after, like in a very micro scale, well, like hammering smoothly to remove all those plastics, the different layers that had been casted among them, and we discovered happily that the mountain had been, the hills had been created, and that all these aged, almost transformation of the concrete as a soulless material into something that had an enormous vitality, an enormous beauty. It looked like almost Carrara marble, no? Because it had all those wrinkles and all those different prints and tints of the process. No? This process of doing things straightly wrong. No?
So I think they succeed in mediating between the scale of the landscape and the scale of the visitor, of the human. And actually, when you are close to these structures, you feel more protected. You feel sheltered by these masses in what is a very harsh environment of huge winds, big heat, or big snow. And they perform, they are extracted from the landscape, they are part of it, they reflect the colors of the sky, they blend with the clouds, they expand the ground into their surfaces, but they also operate within the realm of art as part in dialogue with other art pieces that are occupying the center. And they have amazing architectural properties that sometimes are not so evident when seeing an image, but the way that they make the sound travel and project into the landscape, the way that it allows the musicians to interact with it, the way that the masses calibrate the temperatures in the summer and in the winter, and of course they shelter when it rains or it snows. And but their meaning is really open, again, as we were seeing in the first project, to interpretation, to appropriation, and to be completed by music and by the program and by the visitors there.
Our experience is that the musicians love it, and having
the brave musicians
and having a connection with the land, with the architecture, the matter, and music is kind of a unique experience that the Art Center is inviting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that absolutely awe-inspiring talk. I want to start with who you are and this idea of context, different contexts. As you kind of illustrated these two sometimes competing realities, that of sight and that of the system that you design. You described yourself as starting as local architects, working in the context, the historical context and the material context of Galicia, of Santiago de Compostela. I'm curious now that you have moved your practice. I don't know if you would call yourself local Boston architects, but you did just get your license here. With the beauty of hindsight, knowing now the pains of construction, of everything that you are not supposed to do in this North American context, not being your own contractor, et cetera, how has that evolved your way of working in hindsight? Had you started here, would you be there with your practice?
Well, having started here, we don't know, because it's true that we had in Spain opportunities to develop all this knowledge and all these areas of expertise, because we found coming out of the university that we had to take responsibility whenever we build a building of everything, of the structure, of the mechanical engineering, of the architecture itself. So we were trained with that understanding of the role of the architect. So if we had been trained here, I cannot say, but we feel lucky because we had that opportunity. Now when we come here, I think there are opportunities to be a builder in the US, So, sometimes we like being a bit provocative, but the fact is that we don't content ourselves with being called design consultants. We don't feel we fit in that category, actually. So we are finding the way of being builders in the US, and actually prefabrication and dislocating part of the construction allows for that. So we're not defeated here in that sense.
I want to add something, is that, in Spain, the architect does the structure, the MEPs, that's the job, Here, every time that we've done that, we've been insulting someone, okay? And we love it, because by doing the engineering and the MEP and everything that is part of the building, we think it's the only way architecture can survive, not by segregating design here, structure here, MEP here, and code consultant here. I think that the integration of this is what the builder used to do. Is our background, is scandalous in the United States, I understand that, but I think it's the only way that architecture has to survive, right? Because the designer has been pushed to a little corner through liabilities and through responsibilities, and architecture is such a complex thing that requires the architect to really do, I would say, everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what is so incredibly strong is this, what you say, you are designing the process of the conceptualization, the materialization, the process of construction. when I look at the, I understand it's not a kind of here or this one or that one, but you do have this kind of strand of the kind of globalized system of prefab modules versus this very much this kind of site information. The project is in constant formation. To what extent is it important at all? And you see it also, of course, in all the videos, and which is very important to your work. To what extent is it important to you that the process is legible in terms of the experience, the outcome of it? We have this insight listening to you, but is it important, the sequence, the process, in terms of the experience and understanding of your work?
I think, it's important for us. For us it's very important to draft this process because it's kind of our route map. It's the way that we have evolved as architects. It's our method of doing architecture. No? So we develop this method, and sometimes it's very legible in the architecture, because we are applying it in ways or with elements that allow that legibility. Maybe in elements that are more prefabricated or offsite, that legibility might not be so evident, or some of it. But there is always a trace of how things come together that that is part of the way we design. No? I don't know if that's important or not. We do think it has a value, because whenever you start to understand a building, or you start asking questions about a building, how it's been built, and the building is giving you hints, I think that's a way of inducing that reading. And we do think that it's important for architecture to inspire and to ask questions and to provoke and to get people involved and interested and active.
In a very practical answer, when we are designing, the first thing that we think is how we're going to make it. So here, we are sharing this with you, and as we are in school for pedagogy, but it's just pure practicity. When we were doing this, the first thing after doing this informal structure, say, okay, how could we do this in Montana, with the tools, how could we train the people there to be able to do this? Or when we are doing the high-rise systems and we are working with a developer with his own set of rules, with the economy, with the circumstances, we are already thinking in that process of how are we going to build those pieces, how are we going to be assembled, who or what is going to connect them, how much does it cost to do this. So, not thinking about the process is impossible. You have to have it either assimilated into the design, but you have to think about it.
I'm curious, has it ever failed? When I look at these videos of, you casting these things and then simply relying on gravity, right? There's no mechanical connection. In this mode of constant experimentation, making models, etc., right? The kind of the spirit of contingency, open-endedness, that the process is important and you're not designing necessarily the outcome, you're designing the process. Tell us about your failures.
No.
There's
we can talk about failure as a concept.
There are positive
you're
failures.
amongst friends.
There is a great level of uncertainty, but most of it is cleared through this process of training that we've tried to illustrate. First the concept models, but then we change scale, we make bigger models. We have not shown some of the videos that we have, because then the computer would have exploded completely, but of making these mock-ups on the site with the workers there and testing things and making modifications. So there is a training developed like athletes, no? They train for a race. And then, I mean, the race can go wrong, of course, but if you have done a good training, no, it's, you have a lot of things on your side. So we were pretty confident about many things, of course, structure, of course, you know, some notions of basics of acoustics, and you know, scale we had tried, but again, we didn't have the final vision until everything had been removed and the piece was by itself, because even the cranes, you know, changed completely the scale of this architecture on the site, no? So we had developed a good plan and a good script, but we were not comfortable until we didn't see it, you know,
And
built, no?
failure in architecture has multiple phases, okay? It's the...
Well, you learn from failures.
Yeah, or you run away, no? Like, oh, I won't do this again. Yeah? And some of them are very beautiful. Yeah? For example, I mean, the leaks. Yeah? We can make about leaks a full book. Yeah? But the problem is when we've had buildings that leak from above, you know? So those are the big failures.
From below?
Yes, from below, I mean. For example, the most beautiful failure that we had was in this portal, that the project was about touching only in the center. And we were talking, so we put them together, they were still craned, so it was safe, but in a still not definitive position. And we were taking the group picture. And suddenly...
Under?
Not under, but 10 feet away. And suddenly I hear... Well, the ground had failed a little bit, and the stone rotated maybe 2 degrees, but suddenly it finds its own equilibrium and touches twice. Okay, that's a failure. Beautiful, I love it, because then I can say that the stone found its own position. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But it was a failure of the foundations, actually. Yeah? So next day we reinforced them a little bit. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah? The failures, financial failures, those are good ones. Yeah? We shouldn't talk about those.
No.
But, well, it's a failure of the architecture. No? Back in Montana, we anticipated crane time. Mm. We had to multiply it by 10, okay? Because the wind blows. Yeah, we know the wind blows, but we don't know how much. That's a failure. Yeah? So why the process is so important? Because we have to have the knowledge to be able to anticipate the wind blows in Montana when we organize the crane. And those are failures. Yeah? The ones that we are sometimes more interested in is that, for example, when we unearthed Domo, that could have been a total failure. I mean, a bad one. Eh? I'm sure there would be plans to resolve it, like hammering all the structure. I don't know, we could have done something, but we love to provoke that moment of really excitement. And I think that's what prefabrication and these kind of actions gives us an added emotion to build a building. I think ultimately this is about to have fun, eh? And we like when a building is assembled in 7 days, like appears, or when we unearth a structure, or when suddenly something that we've been working for months, we do like this, boom, you know. And yeah, that has a potential of failing, but I think that it's more dangerous in terms of failure when the architect loses control into 100 other craftspeople and companies. Then is when it's guaranteed the failure sometimes.
Yeah,
I mean, research in architecture is not so well understood, and we say this coming from MIT, where we thought that research in architecture would also be something like completely normal, but you know. When somebody, a scientist, is researching on a vaccine, or you understand that the process can fail, no? And there's a risk implied. But and in architecture, some of the things that we are doing, they are designs, but they are research, no? They're trying to discover things that are not there because we have not built them before. Now, of course, if we had to do it again, we know much more now. No? But of course, it's always measuring the level of risk. You cannot risk safety or structural resistance. You cannot risk. You can risk a texture. You can risk a form. You can risk. No, there are things. So you have to be very responsible, but you can also play with the limits, with the boundaries. And here, the clients were. Typically when we do this kind of explorations, we are our own clients and we feel safe like that. Here, our clients were our big allies, and they were super excited to make this happen. So they were behind us and supporting us, and this was very important.
For example, when we wanted to start this project with the explosion, that was provoking the failure. The failure was the one that could become something amazing, or we had to re-explode and re-explode until we arrived to a position that we were comfortable with. So I think engineering and the process turns the failure into something that, if not you're chasing it, but you are surfing with it. And it's not so bad.
I'm asking the question because it's obvious that you have fun, and there's absolutely this element of discovery and not really knowing what you will end up with when you are making the models, which I think is incredibly important for the students. And I know that they have questions. I just want to ask one last one before I open it up to the audience. Speaking of openness, whether it's a real developer or a hypothetical developer, the projects that are these kind of very open-ended frameworks, Plot Tower and the Chicago Biennial, and these ideas of a kind of unfinished framework that are waiting for a tenant to fill in, etc. What is your limit of contingency that you would be happy with in terms of how a client or a developer would finish or fill in this system? If you give him
total freedom.
So you would be happy if you present all these beautiful double height spaces and the developer says, "Thank you very much," and starts filling in floor plates,
maybe not.
maximizing the envelope.
Maybe we might not be happy with that, but I'm positive sure that when a developer sees in a tower for the volume of an atrium embedded into the middle, something that he might not have seen very well as a space to customize, there would be a fantastic opportunity for him to do something that is different to fill it up. That this is untested. So is there any developer in the room? No.
No. Also, we think is the role of the architect to imagine and to offer possibilities that maybe developers have not thought about, or they don't consider they add value. No, and many times we fail. No, because efficiency wins, or there are many other compromises that are affecting the work that sometimes have nothing to do with the architecture. So yes, you can develop a concept like that, and then a developer comes and wants to fill it because they don't understand the value of having an urban space in their structure. But at least the possibility is there, and we are able to talk about it and present it and offer it as a possibility. And then if we understand buildings as structures, especially high-rise buildings that take a lot of resources to be built, if we can understand them as buildings that will be transformed in time, that probably won't have just one life, like we see a lot of historic buildings being renovated and changing use. And so already thinking that a building can have different lives and can take other forms, and enabling this is what is interesting us. We have not yet worked with a specific program or condition to be able to take it to the next level.
And it really doesn't matter when it comes. You just have to be a little bit patient, and it might take 30 or 40 years, but it's a matter of time. So I think this is something that we assumed as part of being an architect, that we cannot defy the circumstances and challenge everybody. We just have to wait to the opportunity to come and be very, very patient. It's a matter of time. What we cannot do is change according to the circumstances, because then you are every day changing. No? So we have a clear, let's say, artistic and professional objectives, and we work on them all the time, every day, non-stop. And my experience is that the world is pretty big, and the career is very long, and opportunity comes. When we were doing the Truffle, we would have never imagined that almost a decade after, some marvelous people from the other part of the world would have called us to do something in continuity in Montana, in Fishtail. But these things occur. The problem is that if you abandon or you reject or you displace that from your I would say even professional or even emotional objectives as an architect. So if you are able to maintain those, we know that the Big Bang Tower is going to be built. We are positive. It's a matter of time.
The career information.
Yeah.
I should share the microphone. Does anybody have questions?
Oh, sorry, I'm not asking a question. I just.
Thank you so much for that. Really kind of a journey through entropy. I had a question about a kind of hypothetical, because of all of the objects as end results of systems that we've seen in processes and performances are still real in the world, but of course it's obvious that the processes and the systems are just as much the project as the end results. So I wonder if you could consider using those processes and never creating more objects, whether through using those processes as intellectual property or open sourcing them, or working with other people and many collaborators to make them almost, I see them almost as platforms in the same way that technology platforms now.
That's a very good point, because when we talk about process, we think that is a vital journey, no? Or an emotional trip. No, it's something that is scientific, okay? It's a method. And yes, it could be transferred, even licensed. We don't know yet how to do it, but we are looking forward to understand that. Architecture has not been practiced like that very much. We provide services, and we do connect with our clients, trying to match our interests. That rarely they do, but from time to time. Because we are unable to pack properly that process and be able to transfer it to others, like other scientists do all the time. I don't know if it's our own vanity or that we can only do pièces uniques, okay? The fact is that Le Corbusier was very invested in this, and Mies van der Rohe was the great master of doing this, okay? I don't know how he did it, or if he profited from it, but the fact is that what Mies invented really transformed the American city. He invented core and shell, liberating the facade, a full language, and giving that to third parties to use it. I'm not going to judge it if it was well done or not done, and we all love the first Seagram, okay? And not the second and the third, but it has been transformative, okay? And Le Corbusier tried to do it under his control with the social housing, as you know, with the La Domino, I mean, he was trying. So I think that might change a little bit the role of architect and some of the rules of our disciplinary profession, and we challenge a lot of things, but it's coming, okay? We have to make this happen through the highest standards of architecture and in a special way. It's not just like throwing away a way of packaging architecture and doing all this. No, it's not about that. It's about transferring knowledge. It's about transferring knowledge to others, and let the project go. We are, I think, too obsessed, and we do also do things that are so rare that cannot be replicated. No? We had once a client that wanted to build a hotel of truffles. I said, no, this cannot be done. Right? And we lost the client. When we tried to tell him, but we can use the process to create this kind of, no, he was not interested. So it's not just the architect, it's that the society wants objects and products. An architect sells ideas and his own dreams, and this is the difficulty, that we have to match someone that wants them, and not very many want them.
But for us, they are fundamental. I mean, we don't see dead ends in the things that we do. For us, one thing takes us to the other seamlessly. And the Merescopian house, we see it reflected in a lot of the work that we do, and that's why actually we enjoy inhabiting our own works, because we learn a lot from that, from the mistakes, from the successes, and it's all part of it. Even Santiago de Compostela, the first works that we were doing, a lot of the things that we were learning there and embedded in some of the prefabricated works. Might not be evident, but it's part of the same learning process.
Ada.
Amazing lecture, amazing work. For me also, I've learned a lot that I didn't know. You guys are younger, so very exciting to see that there is this incredible energy coming out. A question, I guess, more than anything. I guess we can continue discussing your work, but what I love about your work is many of the things that have been said. That is incredibly consistent, obsessive, engaged. You guys are in it 100%. What I see within all of that is that there is a divide in a way between the work you do more in nature, let's say, where obviously you can experiment 300% more because you're taking even bigger risks and you're working with parameters. Maybe there are also more dealing directly with the organic, let's say, versus the work you're doing in more urban contexts. And I'm curious whether you think about that and how you think that some of these higher experiments that you're doing on the ground could enter possibly the urban environment.
Yeah, this is our current ambition, actually. You named it. Because, these two kind of universes of architecture and almost society have been like, we were talking about this in a podcast for you guys 2 hours ago. We think that there's a potential, and we have not arrived yet there, there's a potential of transvase. Both directions. We have a project that we are sharing now in the Orleans Biennale. It's called Towers of Landscape. It's still in a very conceptual approach, but part of the matter, the structures, the language, and the scale of what we are doing here, we're putting into a monolithic tower that has to fit the urban and the spaces associated to it. And for the next wave of the Montana project, we are thinking about how to do pieces in the landscape that have to move into the landscape. Right? When we say conceptually that we're bringing the mountains to the tabula, we need to bring part of those structural parts also. And there's a discourse of well, there's certain mysteries, no? Like unresolved mysteries, how the stones of Stonehenge arrived there when there's no geological granitic nature there. So those stones came from hundreds of kilometers away. There's theories about this. Or the stones of the pyramids that came out from the quarry in Egypt, from the Nubian quarries, far away. No? So there's a lot of interactions that we are willing to explore, not only the artistic ones, but also the methodological ones. No? Not everything that you do in nature has to do with your neighbor's cow, okay? And the soil just there. Yes, that's the way we've done. Could a project that it react with a natural context, with that kind of extreme, could be done with a lot of displaced parts and still react the same way? No? These are questions that we are exploring. And the other side, can we put into a plot of a gridded North American city something that comes with the substance, the morphologies, the magmatic condition, and the spaces that we have explored in the natural, and they could have been crafted there and reassembled here? These are nice questions that we're exploring.
There is a very beautiful moment in the Truffle, which is that window, because it's the moment where this kind of matter gets capped by a more typical architectural thing. So for me, it's also that curiosity. It's the only time where I saw that, you know, and as you said, you guys have a lot ahead of you. So it's very exciting to think about that. So I wanted to pose it more as a question, but I know that lots will come.
Shall we do one last question?
Yes, I just grabbed the microphone. I just want to make it more abstract, maybe observation in regards to music, knowing your interest in music. I kind of see the way you compose architecture very similar to the way Yannis Xenakis was composing with using the forces of nature. And I'm thinking, is that parallel in your way of designing? And would there be a composer today who you think composes music the way you do architecture?
That's a very easy question for me, because he's my father. Yeah, my father's a composer, and all the music of all those videos, except the chotis of the Casa del Lector, it's a folk dance, are from him. And yes, music is, I think, very present in different moments of the project. Not only to celebrate it with a video and illustrate it, but we understand that in the first super structural, conceptual phase of the artistic vision, the sparks that detonates everything that we do after, the connections between music and architecture are very intimate, very profound, and real. Further efforts to reveal this systemically, I think they failed, even Xenakis, no? Even though I think the profound and the truths of space, of both substantial and unsubstantial arts are really deep.
It does feel like you, speaking of music, and absolutely you are not musicians, and attempts to really translate always fail. But I think you are working within frameworks to be improvised upon, that we see very clearly. One that is very heavy and weighs tons, and one that is very light, and it feels as if there's other narratives, other open-ended frameworks yet to come. So thank you so much for sharing your process with us.
Thank you.